Good afternoon. It is the appointed time and we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting today. First of all, we will now invite the government officials to come in. Before they are with us, I would like to seek members' views concerning invitation for public submissions. Do we need to conduct a public hearing, or will written submissions do just fine? If it is all agreed, then we will just invite public submissions in writing. Would the Secretariat please arrange that? Welcome, government officials. Today, the team is led by Mr. Kirk Yip, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Logistics. There's also Ms. Louisa Fong from the Transport Department, and also Ms. Joyce Kwok from the Transport and Logistics Bureau, Mr. William Shum and Mr. Curtis Chiu from the Transport Department. We also have Mr. Anderson Chan from the Department of Justice. He is the Senior Government Counsel. I will now first invite the Deputy Secretary to brief us on the contents of the amendments. Members, we are proposing amendments to two regulations so as to tap technology to enhance the overall quality of taxi service in Hong Kong. The first proposal is to require all taxis to be equipped with a journey recording system, or JRS, and require all taxis to provide e-payment means to all passengers, one QR code e-payment means and a non-QR code e-payment means. First of all, the JRS journey recording system is for recording the in-vehicle situation. That's the in-vehicle recordings. There's also the dash camera recordings for recording the front view and rear view outside the taxi, and finally, location data. They will all be linked with the centralized platform run by the Transport Department, so that authorized officers can gain access to these data for handling law enforcement on complaints. Now, we believe that our proposals will be beneficial for the interests of the taxi industry, taxi drivers, and the passengers. First of all, the taxi passengers' experience will be improved. The journey will be safer. E-payment is also more convenient for them. For taxi drivers, an important objective of the proposals are to protect the law-abiding drivers. Now, in the past, there were disputes which may put the law-compliant drivers on the wrong foot. Now we have a cooperative system for protecting them. This will benefit the trade as a whole. The JRS will enhance the journey safety for taxis, with the front view and rear view images outside the taxis recorded. In terms of delineating the liabilities for accidents and facilitating settlement of claims by insurance companies, this will be beneficial. It will create room for reduction in taxi insurance premiums. So last year, we have consulted the panel on transport. We have also consulted the taxi trade on our proposals. In general, there is a consensus that the proposals be implemented as soon as possible. My presentation ends here. Before I open the floor, may I bring to your attention that there is a letter sent by the legal advisor to the government concerning several points. Now, the reply is now available. Now, I suggest the government to explain the positions of the government on these questions. Now, about the letter, on the 8th of August, we have replied to those questions. Just very briefly on our answers. Concerning legal notices 163 and 164, now there are two types of recordings. One in-vehicle recordings, and the other one is the dashboard camera. So they will be dealt with differently. Now, for in-vehicle recordings, Taxi compartments is regarded as a semi-private area. And also the in-vehicle recordings will capture the audio data of the conversations between the drivers and the passengers. This is rather sensitive, and the public will have high expectations for privacy protection. So for that matter, we think we need to adopt more stringent protection for in-vehicle recordings. So for this type of recordings, the longest storage period will be no more than 30 days on the system. Beyond that, it will be overwritten. The other set of data is dash camera recordings. That's the video recordings of the situation in front and behind the vehicle. Now for the trace benefits, the data is useful for investigation of traffic accidents and also for delineation of liabilities in case of traffic accidents. This is also useful for the trade to manage their taxi fleets and their drivers for enhancing the service quality. So this is useful for the trade. Now, based on that need, we will allow the trade to have access to this type of less sensitive data. So the storage period will be no less than 30 days. If necessary, the data can be kept for a longer period. That's because of the different natures of the two types of data and also their different purposes. Now, another question raised by the legal advisor, the specified offense, and some legal points behind. There are two offenses which are strict liability offenses, including installation of the JRS and also not to tamper with the seal on the JRS. Now, one major purpose of our proposal is to ensure that there is a comprehensive set of journey record. This is the basic requirements behind the proposal. Now, to adjust or to modify the JRS, authorization from the Transport Department is needed. And there are not a lot of likelihood where one would need to tamper or modify the JRS. So we pitch these two offenses as strict liability offenses. For other administrative or regulatory offenses, we will allow the accused to put up a statutory defense, which will be considered by the court. Legal advisor, any further comments? Thank you, Chairman. No more questions. Members, concerning the government's reply on the legal advisor's questions, any more follow-up questions? Now, just this morning, I received a letter from the Taxi Industry Council, or Taxi Council. I invite the government to address the points raised by the Taxi Industry Council before we move on. Which government official will address their points? Chairman, allow me. Once again, we thank the Taxi Industry Council for giving us valuable opinions. Now, concerning the views raised by the Council, a point is that the installation cost may be a concern. Now, the major objective of the JRS is to protect the passengers. It will also be beneficial for the trade. For example, in case of a dispute, instead of relying on verbal arguments, taxi drivers can rely on corroborative evidence from the recording. And also that would enhance the journey experience of taxi passengers. And we think that will help improve the business of taxi industry. So the system will bring about a lot of benefits for the trade. So this equipment should be, the cost of this equipment should be borne by the trade itself. So we propose that the trade should bear the cost of installation of the JRS themselves. But we have made reference to the available products in the market. It just costs several $1,000s to install. We think it is reasonable. And also we have talked to the service provider. The monthly subscription fee is just a few $100s. So we think the cost of installing and maintaining the system is just minimal. We think the ask is reasonable. Now on their second point, the limitation on data storage period. As we said, if the data does not relate to in-vehicle images, but rather recordings of images of the front view and rear view of the car, then we should allow the trade to have access to these data to facilitate investigation and insurance claim. So for this type of data, we will allow the image or the recordings to be stored for more than 30 days. So that the stakeholders can retrieve the data according to their needs. Now finally, after implementation after the regulation has taken effect, when the JRS is not functioning as normal, then the taxi owners and the authorized installers will have to notify the transport department within a reasonable period of time. The taxi owner should arrange maintenance and repair for the taxi to restore the system, and then have it checked by the transport department before the taxi is allowed to be hired again. So just like any other defaults, if the JRS is not running properly, the taxi should not be running on the road for hire. So it would be most ideal if the contractors can provide maintenance service promptly. So in our next step, we will reach out to maintenance contractors to be prepared to provide prompt maintenance services to shorten the downtime. Now, I have also read the letter. Paragraph 3, the Council asks whether there will be 24-hour around-the-clock maintenance service available. So will you make that a specific condition for the contractor? Now, if the JRS is not functioning in the middle of the night, I can't hire out my taxi unless it is fixed the next morning. But if there is a 24-hour maintenance service, I can have it fixed immediately and continue to do business. So there should be such services available. Please consider that. Now, members, if you have questions, please press the button.
We have so far 3 members pressing the request to speak button. Well, 5 of them. We should have adequate time for everyone to ask questions. I'll read out the order in which members are going to speak. Dr. An Yu, Mr. Lam Chen-sing, Mr. Adrian Ho, Mr. Kwok Wai Kern, Dr. Chen Hanpen, Mr. Yu Pat Lang, 6 of them. Dr. An Yu. Thank you. I have 2 questions. First, we have the in-vehicle camera and the data will be uploaded onto the central platform of the government. Well, I want to ask, for drivers or owners, can they install their own cameras as well? How can citizens distinguish which one is the government's, which one is the drivers or taxi owners? We don't want to give off the impression that someone would have their own cameras posed as the ones of the government. We have the taxi fleet regime having been launched for about a month now. So have we found any operational problems, or have we found any issues with the taxi driver offense points system? Thank you. I would like to thank you for your questions on this system. We are asking them to upload data of the journey recording systems, and they will have in their vehicles storage to store data of the storage period that we have designated. If complaints are received, it is only with the meeting of stringent conditions that we will have the data transmitted onto the central platform. And the authorized personnel, they can only gain access when stringent conditions are met. That's how we are going to protect personal data privacy. And in the legislation, our proposed provisions, this system approved by the Transport Department will record the images of the driver and passengers with audio. With the operation of the provisions, the taxi owner cannot install any other cameras that can record the images and audio of passengers. Right now, some taxis may be installed with such cameras. We will remind them in future that they cannot have cameras in future that can record images of passengers, because we do note in some taxi fleet taxis, they will have cameras that can record their drivers. This is allowed, but if the cameras also record the image of passengers, that is not allowed. As for the taxi driver offense points system, we have made 2 overhauls in future. In December 2023, we have a 2-tier penalty system launch, and in September 2024, we have the taxi driver offense points system. For the one in December 2023, we have focused on 4 more serious offenses of taxi drivers relating to taxi meters and other offenses. We have increased the penalties, and we have seen the court handing out harsher sentences since. This has essentially achieved our policy intent. In September 2024, we had launched the taxi driver offense point system. For 11 taxi-related offenses, we will have specific points accumulated, and we have 113 drivers as at the end of July having accumulated points. We haven't had any of those drivers' licenses suspended at the moment, but we believe this has had a deterrent effect on the trade to improve service quality. Thank you, Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, Chair. I want to ask, it is said in the paper. Well, I actually want to know, under what circumstances can the footage be reviewed? According to the paper, it would be when there are investigations relating to traffic-related provisions. When can the parties involved review the footage themselves? If one has lodged a complaint with the traffic complaints unit, can they review the footage, or can they go to the Equal Opportunities Commission complaining about discrimination against disabilities? Would they be able to review such footage? And we have fleet taxi drivers, if they are going to the Labor Department for complaints or for mediation, can they review the footage as well? I hope the threshold can be set higher because we want to protect personal data privacy. Next, we also have the Transport Department. Having a system that would allow voluntary installation of CCTV cameras in taxis by taxi drivers, but we have seen such footage being publicized before, such as some footage involving celebrities. So how are we going to enforce the relevant guidelines, or how are we going to regulate such? According to the Bureau's representative, we should not have easy access to relevant footage, but if they're installing their own cameras, or if they have cameras that are supposed to only record their drivers, and recording the images of passengers as well, and the footage is made public, what is going to happen? Lastly, how are you going to regulate the suppliers? If the devices frequently go out of order, or if footage is leaked, or as the chairman said, if there are supposed to be emergency maintenance services, but they cannot really uphold such service standards, will you allocate them with lower points when you are doing a review of their performance? Thank you. Mr. Kirk Yip, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about how we can better protect personal data privacy when we are handling complaints. For personal data privacy, we attach great importance to that. So for the journey recording systems, the images and data recorded, they are encrypted. In other words, our designated contractor or the authorized personnel, they can only access such data with the key and password on the central system. The taxi owners or drivers cannot decrypt the relevant data. Please rest assured we attach great importance to security. As for the format of storage, it would be non-extracted hard disk. Essentially, that will be fixed on the system itself. It will be sealed. It's not like some general hard disks that are easily removed. And as I said, the data are encrypted. The hard disk itself cannot be removed either unless they remove the seal, and we have offenses proposed should that happen. In general, for the central system of the Transport Department, we will make sure to have a third-party independent contractor to conduct a privacy impact assessment to make sure for our central system, any access, the security risks involved will be accessed. And the data on the central platform, as I said, there will be passwords needed to access the data, and the passwords will be updated from time to time. This is how we can protect the system. Should one wish to lodge complaints, one can lodge a complaint via 1823 or the Transport Advisory Committee, or directly with the Transport Department. If the Transport Department has received a complaint, the officers of the Transport Department will review the complaints, the basic information of such, and then the officers of Transport Department can retrieve data on the central system for analyses. If there is sufficient evidence to show that there is potentially irregularity involved, and if the passenger consents to it, we will transfer the data to relevant law enforcement agencies. Even if the passenger does not consent to it, we will follow on this. We will write to the taxi owner and the driver that those are the circumstances, and there will be proper follow-up. Should there be something wrong with the system? As said earlier, we do want them to provide emergency maintenance services. So we will try to see on the market what they are providing. We will promulgate the relevant standards later this year. We will also liaise with the authorized contractors to have them provide emergency maintenance services to taxi drivers and owners. Mr. Lam Chen Sing, I understand there is regulation involved with the journey recording systems and cameras. So the Transport Department does not have to give approval for installation. Some taxi drivers or taxi owners may have already installed some cameras. What is the level of regulation for this? Well, as I said earlier, when the provisions come into operation, taxi owners and drivers cannot install other cameras that can record the images and audio of passengers, but they can have cameras that can record only the images and audio of the driver. We have proposed if we have their own cameras recording images of passengers, that will be a fine, a level 3 fine and a 6-month imprisonment term. So this is an offense. And if they use such data in accordance with Chapter 486, the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, there are restrictions on use of such personal data. And we have actually guidelines that are to be issued to the taxi trade if drivers and taxi owners have installed such surveillance systems. The personal data obtained would have to comply with the requirements in the relevant laws. And if there are videos made public and there are complaints, these can be followed up on because they may have breached the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance. Mr. Adrian Ho. So I understand Section 78A, it says that the system needs to clearly record everyone in the vehicle, but during nighttime or when there is light exposure, there may be blurred images. So when there are complaints against drivers, or when some unscrupulous passengers deliberately try to cover the cameras, where would the responsibility lie? How can we make sure there is an effective use of such cameras and images? As for location data, we have talked about there being an offense of not taking the most direct practicable route. But who is going to determine what is a practicable route? When roads are blocked, can the driver justify themselves? How can we determine when one is not taking the most direct practicable route. Next, we have a level 2 fine for not being able to protect e-payment means. But the fine for the system going out of order can be quite high. Why is the punishment for a technical issue heavier than one deliberately not providing an e-payment means? 3 questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ho. Your first question about the technology. The resolution that we require, we will specify the requirements in the future. In a few months' time after the passage of the amendments, the Transport Department will specify the basic hardware requirements of the JRS. Now, we have conducted some market research. Now, with the minimum requirements will be 720p resolution. Even at night time, with that resolution, we can capture clear image from the system. Now, of course, the taxi drivers or taxi owners are allowed to install a system with higher resolution than that. So with our requirements, even during low light condition or poor weather, the image will be clear enough. Concerning the JRS or other journey recording system, the system should not be tampered with, but we will allow some statutory defenses. Now, the lens of the cameras of the JRS may be dusty, rendering the images unclear. But we will expect the taxi drivers to check whether the JRS is functioning properly before they start their business, just like the taxi meters. They need to check whether there are any obstruction to the camera. They can check whether the lens, the lights is on. After checking everything is proper, they can start doing business. So we will encourage drivers to develop such a habit for their own and the passengers' protection. Concerning complaints about taking detours, now with the JRS in place, upon receipt of complaints by our colleagues will pull up the relevant data. Since there is also location data, like Mr. Adrian Ho said, maybe there are some roads closures on that day because of certain events. Since we have the date and the location, we can easily find out whether the driver is actually taking the passengers on a longer route and judge the merits of the complaint. But how do you define whether the driver is taking a detour? Because that's very objective. Now, qualified taxi drivers should be able to understand or tell what it means by the most direct route. I will seek the opinions of the Transport Department. So maybe there are some cases where it is an obvious detour. Now, whether it is a detour depends on whether that is the most practicable direct route. As mentioned by Mr. Yip, we will look at our record. We do keep a record of road closure arrangements at a certain period of times, and we can easily find out whether the driver is taking the longer routes. And what about the penalty? In setting the penalty, we make reference to other offenses in the regulation to make them consistent. So concerning failure to provide an e-payment means, now under 374D, there are offences in relation to drivers not having sufficient cash to offer change to passengers. Otherwise, there would be a $5,000 fine and 6 months imprisonment penalty. So concerning the comparability, the similar nature of the offence, there will also be a tier 2 penalty and 6 months imprisonment for the failure to provide e-payment means. For failing to keep the JRS properly running, we have also made reference to similar offences in Cap 374D. Again, Tier 3 fine, $10,000 and 6 months imprisonment. So that's for ensuring comparability between the offences. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Chairman. Now, the taxi chapter in our Transport and Transportation Industry Council supports the requirements for installing JRS. Now, most of the taxi drivers are law-complying. They think that the installation of JRS, it will protect them against unreasonable customers and complaints. But actually, the regulation is quite complicated. Now, I would like to follow up on the question about installation of cameras in vehicle. Of course, that is not allowed. So what if the camera installed by the driver himself captures the face of the drivers only, but there is audio recording function? Is that allowed? In case of a dispute, no one has an upper hand because all the recordings, the data is stored on the centralized platform. So that cannot be sorted out on the scene. It's only upon complaints by the driver or the passenger that the law enforcement agencies or the transport departments would retrieve the data. So in that case, it may add to the workload of the other departments because the recordings will only be retrieved by these departments. How long does it take to go through this process? What if there are a lot of cases? Now, in the past, driver and passenger may settle the disputes on the spot, but now the parties may take it to the departments. So will that lengthen the time required for settling the disputes? Thirdly, now if the case falls short of a formal complaint, but there is dispute, and both parties would like to apply for the recordings, will the procedure be cumbersome? Do both parties have to fill in a form to apply for the recording? And finally, it is an offense if one prevents or blocks the cameras or prevents the JRS from capturing images or audio. Now, as far as I understand, the in-vehicle surveillance system does not come with a screen, so you don't know whether the camera is filming the right angle. In case of a collision, the camera may be moved. So how can the driver protect himself? Mr. Kirkip, thank you. Now, after the requirement has taken effect, we will specify that the driver or the taxi owner cannot install any device in the taxi compartments which can film the face of the passenger and capture audio. So driver monitoring safety devices which are allowed to be installed should not come with an audio function, and also they cannot film the face of the passenger. That's to prevent the situation where unscrupulous drivers leak privately captured image infringing privacy. So for in-vehicle device installed by drivers, they cannot capture audio. Now allow me to step in. For driver monitoring safety devices, audio function is not needed. The JRS will cover that, so the driver monitoring safety device needs not have an audio function. That's correct. And about handling of complaints, one of the major objectives of this system is to screen complaints without merit. Now, say for example, Macau has introduced a similar system for their taxis. After the introduction of that system, the number of complaints has dropped by 90%. So, for difficult customers, the new system will protect the drivers against these customers. We don't foresee a surge in complaints number. On the contrary, we think there will be fewer complaints. Now, concerning the accidental tampering of the cameras of the JRS, may I defer to the Transport Department on the details? Now, from what we see on the products on the market, the products would be linked to a back-end system. If the system is not functioning normally, then there will be a light signal signaling that the system is not running properly. So that function is available already. Mr. Ben Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Now, we have been asking for this in-vehicle recording system for many years, so I'm happy to see it finally coming through. Now, there are several authorized suppliers or installers who can install the JRS. But I don't think the LED light signal is sufficient to tell us whether the system is functioning normally. So whose responsibility is that to check the system? The taxi owner, the driver, the authorized installer, or the government? Now, if the system has been exposed to sunlight for a prolonged period, it may mess up the sensors of the cameras, and even with the signal on, it cannot capture a clear image. Now, currently, there is a string attached to the taximeter to show that no one has tampered with the taximeter. But for a JRS, even if no one has tampered with it, it may break down. And since it doesn't have to do with the fare, it is not easy to spot whether the camera is functioning properly. Now, there is an in-vehicle recording system and also the dash camera. For device installed by the driver himself, the system cannot capture the face of the passenger. But can the driver use images captured by the device installed by the driver himself as evidence? If that's the case, then drivers may tend to install similar device on their own. So we need to specify clearly whether this is allowed.
Deputy Secretary, Thank you, Dr. Chen, for your questions. As mentioned earlier, we have many taxis that have installed similar systems. We have the Transport Department liaising with the firms on the market. We have seen different products available. The operations are relatively stable and reliable. The tech is quite mature. Say, with our taxi fleets, when we issue the licenses, we do have requirements for them to install journey recording systems that meet our standards, and the 5 fleets have been able to procure different products. So far, we have observed the performance to be quite good. And the regulation of the department is that we will announce specifically the specifications we ask for, and then the drivers or taxi owners can procure their cameras. We will then inspect the systems procured to make sure they're operating normally. We will then seal the systems. We believe the equipment should work properly, but it may go out of order at some point. So at the back end, we will have some authorized installers. And if they have installed the JRSs for taxis at the back end, if they note that the system is not working normally, in law, we ask the contractors to, as soon as reasonably practicable, notify the department. We want to make sure these systems are operating normally. We can have the drivers look at signs of the device, whether it is working normally, but on the back end, the contractors are also collecting information to see if the equipment is working as normal. And if it is not working normally, the taxi owners and drivers will be notified, and the Transport Department, in accordance with the relevant provisions, will be notified as well. And with the system specifications, we will make sure the system is sealed, and these have to meet specifications for handling of investigation and complaints in future. And I think once we have the data reviewed by law enforcement agencies, they will review evidence, not just the data on the system, but also the circumstances in general. Because with incidents, there are different circumstances. Sometimes we will also have some shops' cameras capturing footage. So I believe in police investigations, they will check other evidence as well. Let me add something to this discussion. So when you turn on the engine, would you have a self-detection feature to see if the camera is working properly? I think with cameras in general, you'll have a monitor that will let you check whether the camera is angled correctly, but now you don't. I think if the contractors have this, say, AI feature that can check if the system is working properly, that would be great. But if there is something wrong, will there be any warnings issued? I'll let Mr. Shum answer this question. We will have the central platform check if the images are captured properly. And in future, there will be requirements in relation to this. Next, Mr. Yu Patlo. Thank you, Chair. I have questions, my own question and some follow-up questions on the concern raised by the chairman earlier. So when a driver is working, the system is suddenly down and the driver did not see this. The taxi owner did not find out about this either, nor did those on the back end notice the issue. Where will the responsibility lie? We have also other members express concern about additional cameras being installed in the taxis that can record the drivers but cannot record the images of passengers. When you talk about images, do you refer only to the faces of passengers, but also the body parts of passengers? Is it the case that no part of the passenger can be captured on that footage? As a representative of the tourism industry, I very much support that we should launch the requirements in relation to e-payment means as soon as possible. I believe the relevant provisions will commence on 1st of April next year. I understand that is the timeline, but can we provide some incentives to have the taxi drivers and taxi owners take up such e-payment arrangements as soon as possible that can provide convenience to everyone, really? This can also be a form of safeguard in a way. With the launch of the system, I believe, well, with the payment system, it will be early 2027, but if we can make it faster, that would be appreciated. I also would like to express concern about the issue the chairman highlighted earlier. Taxi drivers need a living, and if your system is suddenly down and they need to have the journey recording systems maintained, they cannot work at all. So are there any backup solutions so that their operations will not be affected by any downtime of such systems? Thank you. Mr. Kirkyip, thank you for your questions. As I said earlier, when the provisions come into effect, the journey recording system, when the vehicle is in operation, has to be operating normally. Should there be any issues with the system, the taxi owners and the contractors will have the responsibility to notify the department. But as you said earlier, sometimes the system may potentially go down when the taxi is working a shift. So we do have a defense available when they have a passenger being conveyed. They have to safely convey the passenger to the destination before they can inspect and notify the department of any potential issues. So this is a defense available. We have also thought about a scenario that is not likely to happen, but if there is something wrong and this is observed by the back end, but this is not shown on the system in the vehicle, a defense is available to the driver that the system did not show anything wrong in the hardware. But in turn, the taxi owner and the contractor will have the responsibility to notify the transport department that there is something wrong with the system and maintenance should be done as soon as possible. Another issue raised was about additional cameras not being allowed to be installed in future. And this much is clear. We did not say specifically which part of passenger can be captured because passengers should not be captured at all. With the images captured, the use of such would have to be quite careful because there may be other criminal offenses involved if you're talking about, say, specific body parts. As for e-payment means, we do thank your support. It is definitely a way to enhance the services of the trade. We do understand that 30,000 odd of the 40,000 odd taxi drivers have some e-payment equipment available already. So we expect at the end of this year or early next year, we should have most taxi drivers being able to provide some e-payment means. We're trying to be prudent with the commencement date of 1st of April 2026. We want to provide support to those who may not be as familiar with such equipment. In August, we have some workshops to be held for older drivers or those who are not familiar with technologies so that they can take up the relevant classes and find out more about the relevant technologies. Thank you. I understand that Mr. Kwok Wai-Kong would like to speak for the second round. Let me ask my first round of questions first. I have some questions. We have the Deputy Secretary respond to the Hong Kong Taxi Council's submission regarding the data storage period of in-vehicle recordings. It would be 30 days. For dash cam recordings, it will be at least 30 days. It can be more than 30 days. So you have no opinion on the resolution. They have also another question about how we have some that have already have the systems involved or installed. They are concerned if they can use such equipment afterwards, or do they need some modifications, or do they have to scrap those altogether? If your reply is that if some modifications are needed and the equipment can still be used, how much cost would be involved? You answered the part about subsidies. As for e-payment means, they are concerned with some remote locations. There may be unstable connections and they cannot have the e-payments go through properly. Then they will need to collect cash. And if they are complained for this, how would this be dealt with? I think you need to deal with such issues. You should perhaps communicate with telcos on this. There's another question on e-payment. I know that there is great competition in the market, so they are not charging any fees at the moment. But with the passage of the relevant or the provisions coming into operation, there will be greater demand, so they may start charging some fees. Will there be regulation on the part of the government for this? The taxi trade has expressed concern. So will the government regulate the level of charges for such? Also, I hope that you can provide more support to elderly drivers. I understand the equipment is very easy to use, but the elderly drivers may have more trouble with technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me first address the last point on the fee. Now, for existing taxi fleets with existing JRS and also for taxis operating along the boundary, I would defer to the Transport Department. Now, it is true that there are many competitors in the market to provide JRS. there are different suppliers and service providers, so discounts have been provided to the trade already. When we make the requirements mandatory to keep their service or products competitive, there is not much room for increasing the fees charged to taxi owners significantly, because there are lots of alternative products in the market. So we think the products will remain reasonably priced. Now, whether the handling fees will be charged by the service providers is their own commercial decision to make. But we think the fees charged by them will still be reasonable. Ms. Fong? Yes, Chairman. Concerning taxi fleets, the regime has launched not long ago. The JRS installed in these taxi fleets were approved by the Transport Department. The setup and the requirements have met our expectation, so we just need to apply a seal to these JRS to approve them. Now, in terms of the availability of network near the border, we have public Wi-Fi available in the area, so we have conducted a test. The Wi-Fi service provided by the government as the boundary control point is efficient, so we will educate taxi drivers on how to connect their JRS to the network. We will also talk to the telecommunication service providers on enhancements of network services. Now, concerning e-payment technologies, many of them do not require internet access. True, if the drivers need to confirm whether the payment has been received. As mentioned by Ms. Fong, the drivers can simply connect to the government's Wi-Fi to check the payment status. So please talk to the trade about that. Now, despite competitors in the market, since it will become a mandatory requirement to provide e-payment means, you can't prevent service providers from hiking up the price. So that's my worry. Mr. Perry, you asked a question about the back-end system of the contractors. Will you require the contractors to provide a backup system? Now, if there are only a few contractors providing the backup system, the back-end system, then if there are anything awry to the systems, then all the records will be gone. So will you require a backup system so that the information can be transferred to the backup system in case of a malfunction? Actually, the centralized platform will come with a backup system. If the main system fails, there will be a standby system running. Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Chairman. My question is similar to the one you asked just now. In the unfortunate event that the centralized platform fails, of course, there will be punishments according to the contractual terms. The data should be migrated onto the backup platform. Even so, there will be a time gap. In the very unfortunate event that the system has gone down and data has been lost, if complaints and disputes are involved, how should we handle these? Now, my other point is a suggestion. Now, according to the administration, with the JRS, there will be fewer complaints and fewer unscrupulous or faulty insurance claims. So in that case, the insurance premium for the taxi trade should be reduced. So will the government keep monitoring the situation? If the amount of claims has gone down, then the insurers should be asked to lower the premium as well, because insurance premium payment is a major part of the cost of the trade. Mr. Yip, as mentioned by my colleagues, there is a backup system backing up the data of the centralized platform. So in drafting the tender, we will take into account members' views to put up safeguard concerning that. We will also conduct a third-party assessment to make sure that there is sufficient security safeguard in place. Concerning insurance premium, one of the benefits to the trade is that when there are comprehensive data available, the process for insurance claim would be much simpler because there is corroborative evidence. We know that insurance premium payment is a large part of the trade's operating cost. So in the long run, we hope that the premium will be reduced. So the insurance authority and the government has been monitoring the trade. Now for insurance claim with sufficient evidence or images, there will be discounts to the taxi drivers. If there are no further questions, we will start the clause-by-clause scrutiny process. Which government official will take us through the regulations? Ms. Joyce Kwok. Thank you. First, on CAP 374A. That's Road Traffic Construction and Maintenance of Vehicles Regulation 2025. It amends CAP 374A in relation to the journey recording systems for taxis. First, commencement date. That's B4960 on the Gazette Chinese version. Now for 1, 3, 5, and 7, it will come into effect on the 11th of September this year. That is the next day after the negative vetting process. That's in relation to the interpretation and also the meaning of the JRS and also the authorized installers and so on. So these regulations will take effect first to ensure that the work can start in earnest. Now 4, 5, and 6 will take effect on the date as appointed by the Secretary for Transport and Logistics on the Gazette. That's in relation to the mandatory requirements of installation of JRS on taxis and also the maintenance of it. Now the actual implementation date will depend on the progress made by the trade. Now we plan to start accepting application from authorized installers in the fourth quarter of this year so that JRS will be installed gradually starting from next year. Now by the beginning of 2027, all taxis will be equipped with JRS. They will be linked to the centralized information platform operated by the transport departments. Any question? Please continue. Now, Clause 2, amending CAP 374A in the manner mentioned in Clauses 3 to 7. Clause 3, that's pages 1 to 4 on the markup copy. Adding Part 3A, journey recording systems for taxis in CAP 374, including new section 78C, D, and E. Third, 78C. That's pages 1 to 2 on the markup copy. Under Part 3A, 4 new definitions will be added. Approved journey recording system, authorized journey recording system installer, journey recording system, and taxi for hire. Any questions? Please continue. New regulation, new section 78D, pages 2 to 4. Meaning of journey recording system. Specifically, it must meet the following requirements. 1. It must be connected to the activation of the taxi drive system, and it has to be activated on activation of the taxi drive system and ending 15 minutes after the deactivation of the drive system. 2. It must be able to record audio and also capture clear images of all parties on board the taxis, including drivers and passengers. It must also be linked to a dash cameras which can capture clear images of the front and rear view of the taxi. It must also be able to collect locational data from the GPS or other navigation systems. Now, it must also show the date and time when the data is captured and also the taxi's registration mark. And all the data must be encrypted to protect the privacy and data security. On storage period, for in-vehicle recording, they must be stored for at least 30 days, which will be deleted afterwards. For locational data and other dashboard data, it is at least 30 days. But this system must be connected to the designated information system of the Transport Department so that it can transmit the recording and data stored in the journey recording system. It must also have a colored signal lamp to signal normal operation of the GRS, and it must be easily visible to any person in the taxi. Next, new section 78E, page 4. Meaning of approved journey recording system. It is a system installed on the taxi or modified for the taxi by an authorized journey recording system installer which has been examined to the satisfaction of the Transport Department and sealed by the Commissioner. This is to ensure that the JRS meets the statutory requirements. Next, clause 4 of the amendment, page 5. It is a technical amendment adding the title of Division 1 Interpretation under Part 3A. Next, clause 5, pages 9 to 11 of the markup copy, adding Division 2, including new sections 78F to J under Part 3A. New 78F, page 9. Taxis must be equipped with an approved journey recording system. Otherwise, it is an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine as level 3 and to imprisonment for 6 months. 78G. Again, page 9. Seals of approved journey recording systems. It must remain intact. If the seal is damaged, the owner of the taxi must report the damage to the Commissioner and cease hiring out the taxi. Otherwise, it is an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine as level 3 and to imprisonment for 6 months. I have a question. 78G2. You said the registered owner and the driver of the taxi for hire each commit an offense. But in reality, the taxi drivers may not know about this. The taxis are managed by the rental company. If the seal is tampered with, it has nothing to do with the drivers. So the drivers will have to explain to the court that they are innocent. Why are you saying both the registered owner and the driver each commit an offense? We have made reference to the existing provisions about taxi meters. As you said, there are occasions where the taxi drivers are the innocent parties, so they may explain their situation to the court. We still have to draft the law so, because there are always the scenario where the taxi owner tells the drivers to keep driving the taxi. Even so, the seal is damaged. If that's the case, the driver is still liable.
So It will be the same as how you are dealing with taxi meters at the moment, correct? Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Chair. I think the chairman asked some very valid questions. You said you have followed the practice, the specific provisions for taxi meters. But the chairman also asked earlier whether there will be a part on the handler. Well, right now, only the taxi owners and drivers will be made accountable because the drivers are using the vehicles and the taxi owners are the owners of the vehicles. So these two parties are held accountable. If their agent is to be accountable in a way, if they are managing the vehicles, then they are an agent of the owner. But the government never said there are agents involved in the system, right? Chairman, when you're looking at me like this, I need to be honest with you. I am dissatisfied with the reply. Because when we are investigating occupational safety and health issues, we have seen the contractors and the frontline officers having been held accountable, but it seems that those who should be made responsible are not. Well, I would say the provisions were drafted up long ago, and back then there weren't really agents. Now they have agents, those managing the vehicles. So they should be held accountable as well because they are stakeholders. So would you consider involving them in the system? I think they are professionals and they are charging fees. They should be made accountable. Thank you, Chair. I think it's hard for us to define whom the handlers are because the drivers, the role is very clear. They are in charge of the vehicles. They're driving the vehicles. Taxi owners, they are registered owners of the vehicles. So taxi owners and drivers are made accountable. So in a way, we are imposing the responsibility on taxi owners so that they will ask their managers, handlers, and whatnot that they will have to meet the requirements in relation to journey recording systems. Well, the issue is quite complex, to be honest. Excuse me. I have some more questions. So if they have agents, the taxi owners have agents dealing with their vehicles, and they have some contracts, will the contracts have to be stamped or registered in any way? Is it because there is a lack of that at the moment that you can't really regulate these arrangements? I understand even in the industry there is no clear definition, and there has to be clear-cut definition in law, which is why we are only holding taxi owners and drivers accountable at the moment. Well, the agent is hired by the taxi owner, so the taxi owner should be held accountable. So if the taxi owners said they are not aware of the issue at all, will the agent be held accountable? I would say this. Taxi owners and drivers are supposed to be held accountable. If taxi owners said they don't know, then we'll see if the driver will be held accountable. We will not hold the agent accountable. I think taxi owners, to be honest, won't be going about doing business. So more likely than not, it would be the driver. So it is hard for you to ask. Rather than the owner, the agent would have to be held accountable even. Say I purchased a license, I have handed it over to a dealer firm to manage the vehicle. I have no understanding of what is going on. I'm only receiving the high charges. If you have to hold the taxi owner accountable, it does not make much sense. But then we haven't really heard about any incidents so far, so I will not follow up on this. But I think should there be incidents, we need some changes made to the law. Please proceed. Thank you. The proposed new regulation 78H, page 10 of the marked copy in Chinese. Alteration to approved journey recording systems. An application for alteration to the approved system may be made to the commissioner by the registered owner or an authorized journey recording system installer. If a person alters the approved journey recording system of taxi and the alteration is not made in accordance with the requirements, the person commits an offense and is liable to a fine at level 3 and 6 months imprisonment. Will the form be simple? Will you ask them to provide a lot of information? It is going to be a simple form, Chair. All right, please proceed. We have a proposed new regulation 78I, page 11 of the marked copy in Chinese. Offenses on defacing and damaging approved journey recording systems, etc. One should not deface, damage, or remove the system or break the seal on the system. A person who, without lawful authority or reasonable excuse, contravenes the relevant provision commits an offense and is liable to the same penalties as earlier. Proposed new regulation 78J. We have some transitional arrangements. We will have a Gazette notice to have the regulations 78F state to come into operation. So for those registered after that date, on the date of registration, these taxis will be equipped with JRSs. So in accordance with 78J, for a taxi registered before the date on which regulation 78F comes into operation, when they are examined, they will be installed with such systems. This is to ensure installation of the 10,000 taxis in Hong Kong of such systems in an orderly manner. Thank you. Please proceed. We are now moving on to Clause 6. After Division 2, we will add Division 3 in Part 3A. We have one proposed new regulation 78K operation of approved journey recording systems. The system should be maintained in good and efficient working order and kept free from any obstruction. If the system is not working properly, the taxi should not be available for hire. The penalties for contravening relevant provisions will be a level 3 fine and 6 months imprisonment. We do have a defense available, as said earlier. If the defect occurred in the course of the journey during which a contravention was detected, or the telltales of the approved system showed that the system was in normal operation despite the existence of the defect, the defense can be raised. Any questions? If not, please proceed. Proposed new regulation 78L, page 13 and 14 of the marked copy in Chinese. Reporting of defects in or damage to approved journey recording systems. Such should be reported as soon as reasonably practicable. And as said earlier, at the back end, we should be able to identify the relevant issues, the installers, and they should report to the commissioner as soon as possible. Anyone who contravenes the relevant provisions will commit an offense and will be liable to a level 3 fine and 6 months imprisonment. Any questions? Mr. Kwok Wai-Keung. I want to ask, when you're saying a report should be made as soon as reasonably practicable, will you set a designated period. We have seen in other provisions, we have had similar drafting, but then we have seen such causing confusion because different people would have different interpretations. Say within a day, within a week, or a month, will there be a more accurate description of such? Mr. Kirkyip. Thank you, Mr. Kwok, for your questions. I think we will have a general understanding of such expression as soon as reasonably practicable. Say if it was in the small hours, it is unlikely they can notify the commissioner right away. So that it would be reasonable that they would only notify the commissioner afterwards. But if you are telling us after a week, then one may question whether it is reasonable. And we also say that if there is something wrong, they should not have the taxi for hire. Well, is it the case that you will stop the clock essentially once they have found out about the defect, or they have some other difficulties? We want them to conduct inspections as soon as possible. We do understand they want to have the vehicles available for hire as much as possible, so they really wouldn't have any incentive not to tell us. But we do have some vehicles that are just parked and they are not used. And if they don't turn on the system, even with that, on the back end, the installers can tell what issues there are. So we will liaise with the contractors to make sure we are exchanging such information. Chair, I understand why they thought the taxi owners and drivers would have an incentive to repair such as soon as possible. But we have in future online booked vehicles. We have also some other vehicles that may be available for hire, so they may not be incentivized to use the existing vehicle that has had the system that is out of order, that they will use another vehicle. So is it the case if the vehicle is not going to be used for the next 2 months, do they have to inform you right away? Well, that we have very clear statutory requirements, and there are monthly fees for using the system, albeit the fees will be quite low. That is $200. The maintenance cost is not going to be high either. We don't think this issue will be big enough that they will choose not to use the vehicle altogether. We believe the drivers and taxi owners will have the incentive to repair the system as soon as possible so that the vehicle can be made available for hire. Again, Chair, I have some more questions. When you talk about easing as soon as reasonably practicable, it would just be 1 to 3 days, so why not designate a period? Well, I would say this. If you set a period, there would be people saying 3 days won't be enough. They would need 7 days. Or if you put 7 days, people would ask for 2 weeks. I think, simply put, because these are people's livelihood, they wouldn't just leave them be. Not to mention there will be offenses involved. So taxi owners and drivers will want to repair the system as soon as practicable. And I think there will be some objective bystander standards as to what is a reasonable time frame. So I think as soon as reasonably practicable, one would try to do this. Otherwise, it would be an offense. I think I would accept this expression.
In prosecuting the case, our prosecutors will look at the actual circumstances of the case to see whether there are other circumstances. For example, if there are natural disasters preventing the drivers from reporting the case. So these discretional circumstances can be viewed by the court. Next, 78M, brackets 1. That's pages 14 to 15 on the markup copy. Subsection 1, a person must not interfere with the proper operation of the approved journey recording system or alter, delete, or damage any recording or data stored in such a system. Contravening that, they are liable to a fine level 3 and to imprisonment for 6 months. So besides the designated GRS, if other device is installed to capture any parts of the passenger, it is also an offense. Yes, that's 78M, brackets 3. A device that can capture audio or video recording of the passenger in the taxi is not allowed. Otherwise, it would be a fine to level 3 and imprisonment for 6 months. Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Thank you, Chairman. Section 78M, a person interfering with the proper operation of the system. Now, 78K says that the JRS must be operating in good condition and that the situation within the taxi must be captured clearly. It seems the two offenses are very similar in nature. Now, there are other offenses, for example, tampering with the recording or blur the image. So can the government tell us what are the actual differences between the offenses under 78K and M? Are there situations where the offenses under both regulations or both sections would be triggered? Ms. Kwok. Thank you, Mr. Lam. There are two different offenses. 78K's liability is on the driver. Before making available the taxi for hire, the taxi driver must check if the system is running normally and that the functions are available. If the driver chooses to put a sheet of plastic in front of the camera, they may not be tampering with the system. They haven't even touched the system, but that still counts as tampering with the functions of the system. So that would trigger the offense under 78K. For Section 78M, the scope is much wider. Any person must not interfere with the operation. So even a passenger cannot tamper with the system's function by putting a hand blocking the camera. Please continue. Clause 7 of the amendment, page 16 of the markup copy, amending Regulation 120AA1, that's the definition of applicable provision. The reference to JRS is added so that the Secretary or the Commissioner can require anyone to install the system. Now we've come to Cap 374B. That's mainly about the recordings and data collected by the system. And also the drivers are allowed to provide e-payment means to the passengers. Now, Clause 1 of the regulation, commencement. Section 49A under Section 4 will come into operation starting from 11th of September this year. The information system will be specified by the Commissioner. So that's for allowing the trade to prepare for the system. And concerning the concerning Section 3, which is related to the provision of e-payment means, that will come into operation on the 1st of April 2026. That's 6 months after the negative vetting process. Now, for regulations in relation to collection of information and recordings, including Section 49B, C, D, and F under Section 4, and also Section 4 and Section 5 in the regulation, they will take effect along with Section 6 of the regulation to commensurate with the operation of the JRS requirements. Clause 2, it specifies the amendments to Road Traffic Public Service Vehicles Regulations Cap 374D as set out in Sections 3, 4, and 5. Clause 3, page 2 of the markup copy, adding the new 47A under Part 6. That is, taxi drivers are required to allow taxi fares to be paid by at least one QR code payment means and at least one electronic payment means that is not a QR code payment means. Contravention will lead to a fine at level 2 and to imprisonment for 6 months. Clause 4, pages 3 to 7 of the markup copy, that's adding Part 6A. Concerning journey data of taxis, that includes new sections 49B to F. First of all, 49B. There are 8 new interpretations or definitions under Part 6A, mainly in relation to the recording made by the JRS and also the data collected. 49C, subsection 1, the Commissioner may, and also an authorized person authorized by the Commissioner may, retrieve any journey data stored in the taxi's approved journey recording system by transmitting it to the designated information system. That's for accessing and downloading the relevant data. Now, these specified purposes are to facilitate the investigation into any conduct that constitutes a traffic-related contravention, to facilitate the conduct of any proceedings brought in relation to a traffic-related contravention under the law, to facilitate the compliance of an order of the court, to facilitate the performance of the Commissioner's functions, and also for facilitating the Commissioner's compliance with the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance. Mr. Ban Chen, here the Commissioner is empowered to retrieve data for performing his functions. But the Commissioner doesn't have the power to inspect whether the system is running properly. So this means that the Transport Department will not be responsible for checking the proper functioning of the system. If that's the case, should the Commissioner be also empowered that function as well? Ms. Kwok, thank you. Does Mr. Chen refer to the operation of the information system? Now, the information system is entrusted to a third party as authorized by the Commissioner. So the law specifies that the information system is established by the authorized contractor. So according to contractual terms, that's the obligation of the contractor. Another question, please continue. New section 49C brackets 3. It sets out the Commissioner or an authorized person may, for the conduct of research and the compilation of statistics relevant to transport services, to retrieve and have access to dash camera recordings or location data. No question, please continue. New section 49D. Page 6 of the markup copy. Subsection 1, a person must not retrieve, access, upload, download, copy, transmit or use an in-vehicle recording of a taxi without permission. Subsection 2 further sets out, a person who has obtained such recording must not disclose any information relating to the recording to another person unless the disclosure is made for one or more of the purposes specified in Subregulation 3. Contravention is an offense and liable on conviction to a fine at level 4, $25,000. Please continue. New 49A, page 7 of the marked up copy. Designation of information system by Commissioner. The Commissioner may, by notice published in the Gazette, designate an information system. Now, as I've said before, the information system is for storing the image and audio recording transmitted from JRS in taxis. New 49F, page 7. It sets out the Commissioner may, in writing, authorize a person for the purposes of Part 6A. Now, the person means authorized persons who are allowed to retrieve the data. No questions. Please continue. Clause 5, page 8 of the marked copy. Adding new Section 52A in the regulation, it sets out that a notice must be displayed in taxi so that the passengers are aware that the JRS is installed and that audio and video recordings are being made. It must comply with the formats specified in the Gazette and also installed at the location specified by the Commissioner. Otherwise, there would be a level 1 fine, $2,000. No question. We have completed the scrutiny for both amendments. Legal advisor, any other questions? Thank you, Chairman. We have checked the Chinese and English versions. There are no discrepancies. If there are no other questions, now we have completed the clause-by-clause scrutiny of the two pieces of subsidiary legislation. Now, legislative timetable. On the 30th of July, the House Committee Chairman has moved a resolution as the Council to extend the scrutiny period to the Council meeting on the 10th of September. The timetable is as follows. Now, scrutiny on the 10th of September, report to House Committee the 29th of August. Deadline for moving, for notifying the amendments the 3rd of September. Last item. Any other business? There are no AOB. Meetings adjourned. Thank you for attending.